From thinking his MMA career was done for good, to making an incredible recovery, Conor McGregor has revealed what he really felt like after breaking his leg. He thought he'd never step back into the octagon. I mean, that's what everyone believed, right? After all, the way his leg snapped during his fight against Dustin Poirier would make anyone wince. Of course, he was the man living through that nightmare. And, well, he's now revealed that in those brief few seconds when he was still processing what had just happened, he legitimately thought that everything he'd built over all these years was about to be snatched away from him. Like, what an incredible story. To have so much ego and self-belief strutting into the fight like you're the man and watching it all come crashing down. Most people would have lost their cool and maybe quit right then and there. Not McGregor, though. This dude's a fighter. This is why, despite all the doubts in his head, he never actually backed down. Instead, he claims to have used this setback to fuel his comeback. Yep, in a new 4-part Netflix documentary called McGregor Forever, the Irishman has gone deep into his feelings and emotions and talked about exactly what was going through his head in the octagon, the hospital bed, and, of course, in the training arena. And while the documentary premieres May 17th on Netflix, we've got a sneak peek thanks to the first look trailer. Now, I've already talked about how McGregor thought it was over for him, but in that moment, there was one thing that truly helped him calm his nerves: the adrenaline. McGregor genuinely believes that he would have flipped out without it, because a part of him was thinking, Jesus, imagine it all being just taken from me like that. Oh, and yeah, it showed in his reaction after getting injured too, as he sat down on the canvas and shouted, "This is not over," in what looked like a desperate attempt to make himself feel better. What's more, he also thought about not being able to walk properly, or even worse, having to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. I mean, I get that this reaction might be a bit dramatic, but that's just where your brain goes in a moment like that. The Irishman also mentioned how he'd be a different person had he lost his UFC career in that way. All's well that ends well though, right? Because right after this, Conor reverted back to his usual cocky persona saying, "It's McGregor forever and don't you forget it." Whether you like the guy or not, you can't deny the immense effort it must have taken to pull himself out of that dark place and return to being the Notorious that we've all come to love over the years. Now, the brief trailer only shows some extra footage from the fight, from the moment that he fell to the ground and then a sequence with Conor in a hospital bed. With that said, there are a bunch of other fascinating details about the docu-series that the UFC star has shared on social media. For starters, every single one of those 4 parts is going to be an hour long. Yep, a full hour, meaning it's going to be 4 hours long, so we can expect plenty of behind-the-scenes footage and, of course, words from McGregor himself. What's more, the Irishman also shared on Twitter that this was the only place to hear his true story, which, by the way, is only getting started according to him. The official description for McGregor Forever also says that it's going to be an all-access look at the controversial superstar with a deep dive into the history of what brought him to this point. Now, whether that history goes beyond the injury or is just limited to events after UFC 264 remains to be seen. After all, this isn't the first time Conor's getting a documentary made about him, as 2017's Conor McGregor gave us a good look at what it's like to be in the shoes of one of the biggest stars in the UFC. But, regardless of whether we dive back into his history, Netflix has confirmed that a major chunk of the documentary will be about the aftermath of the injury and his rehabilitation process as he embarks on the most important moment of his career. I mean, all these things are reasons enough to get excited about the upcoming documentary. If you're still not convinced, though, then let McGregor Forever's director, Gotham Chopra, change your mind. After all, this is a guy who knows exactly what it takes when it comes to making a top-notch sports documentary. Seriously, where do I even begin? He's worked on projects like Kobe Bryant's Muse, Why We Fight, and of course, Religion of Sports. Oh, and yeah, Religion of Sports, which is the media company in charge of the docuseries production, was also founded by Chopra alongside Tom Brady and Michael Strahan. Like, this dude's in the big leagues, and according to him, you're not ready for the absolute roller coaster of a ride that this documentary sends you on. In a press release, Chopra talked about how Conor is unlike anyone he's ever collaborated with, which is a wild statement considering he's worked with some of the greatest athletes of our time. But of course, there's a reason for that. He said that Conor's an entirely unreasonable man, which is something his trainers have said in the past too. However, because of his rowdy personality, it's impossible not to watch and be fascinated by him. "Don't look away, I guarantee you'll definitely miss something inexplicably wild," he said while wrapping up his statement. "Yeah, I'm fully sold on this." That being said, while the documentary will obviously have a pretty detailed look at McGregor's life after UFC 264, it's not the only time he has opened up about his struggles. In fact, back in 2022, he even suggested that he may never be able to recover from the injury. Now remember, this was when he was back in the gym showing off his progress and how he was able to kick again, but it seems like the issue runs a bit deeper than that. You see, x-rays released by the Irishman showed that he'd suffered a stress fracture before his trilogy bout against Dustin Poirier. What's more, UFC President Dana White also claimed back then that Conor suffers from chronic arthritis in his ankles and that his bones aren't exactly in great shape. However, while this condition was still deemed safe enough for him to go ahead with the bout, it was only when he completely snapped his bone that he realized just how badly he'd screwed up. I mean, throughout his recovery process, McGregor kept posting videos of him training at the gym or showing the condition of his leg after a metal bar was put into it. And well, even back then, most people thought it didn't look quite right. Oh, and then there was that worrying Instagram update from him where he showed that he couldn't hold his leg out straight at high kick level. And that, according to him, meant that no matter what he did, he could still not kick with the power and control that he had before his injury. But of course, it's McGregor we're talking about here. So he also added that he still levels above everyone despite having a steel bar in his leg. I mean, again, love him or hate him, Conor's recovery over the past year has been super impressive to watch. Seriously, even if you put the whole physical struggle aside and focus on how he has managed to recover from a totally broken bone, especially one that's vital for an MMA fighter like him, the mental side alone is enough to impress anyone. I mean, obviously, some might say that he hadn't been the same ever since his loss against Khabib, but at least he was still competitive, right? You know what's commendable though? The fact that he has not only recovered but improved upon his previous physique. Like, the dude has bulked up so much over the past couple of years that in many ways he's almost unrecognizable. He could have easily gone back to lightweight and duked it out over there to get back to the diamond. But instead, he wants to become the first three-weight champion in UFC history after previously holding the featherweight and lightweight belts. Now, he thinks that a win over Michael Chandler will put him in contention for the UFC welterweight title, which is currently in the possession of Leon Edwards. And honestly, with the way Dana White loves him, he's gonna get that title shot if he goes through Chandler. What comes after though? Well, according to the Irishman, he doesn't want to stop anytime soon. In fact, in a recent interview on the My Mother's Basement podcast, he went as far as to say that he's ready for 100 more fights. What a man. So from making an incredible recovery to thinking his MMA career was done and dusted, this was how Conor McGregor really felt after breaking his leg.